Hey fellow Trek Chatters, I'm Pit Trekkie and welcome to another episode of Pittsburgh's Trek Chat. So boy, the news from Star Trek Las Vegas 2018 continues. Before I start talking about this episode, what I want to talk about is a little bit about my feelings about Star Trek Discovery. I don't know if I've actually made it very clear in my previous episodes. I am very much on the fence about this series. I really want to like it. I don't seek out to call it names or to bash it or find things that I completely hate about it. I will not, as a matter of fact, call it STD. I think that that's disrespectful to the people who actually are working on the show. So I always call it DSC. Some things I don't like about the show, I'm not going to lie, I'm a Star Trek purist. So setting this in the prime timeline in the 23rd century and having it look completely nothing like it's supposed to just takes me out of the story. It does not fit to me. And it's very hard. I try to ignore it. I try to just watch it for what it is, but I've been a fan almost 31 years, and it's, for me, I mean, other fans might be okay with that, but for me it's very difficult. So that's been a big part of my issue with Discovery. I know we can't have the same kind of sets and the same kind of look from the 60s. That's why, and I know other people beat this dead horse, but the reality is they should have gone into the future like they're planning with the Captain Picard series. That's the way it should have been from the get-go. CBS could have avoided a lot of this chaos, and there wouldn't be such a big rift in the Star Trek family right now. What I also don't like, it's overly dark. I don't understand why Star Trek fans want really dark Star Trek all of a sudden, instead of the optimistic future that it's supposed to show everybody. That's why we fell in love with it in the first place. But that seems to be the way everybody wants the shows to be nowadays. But I don't like the characters disrespecting their commanding officers. I don't like the fact that the tardigrade was being used and tortured for scientific achievement. I don't think a lot of the characters are very fleshed out. Now, it doesn't mean I don't like the cast. I love the cast, every last one of them. I just don't think it's a very interesting group of characters, and we actually don't have a core group of characters per se to actually love, like we do with all the other Star Trek series. We have a little group, but we don't have certain positions. We don't have like a chief engineer. They said Stamets was the chief engineer, but really, I mean, I think he was just that, just because of that spore drive. I also don't like the fact that Commander Landry was calling some of the prisoners like dogs or animals, whatever. I think it was animals, she said. It just didn't feel like the Star Trek I grew up with. Really, when I watch Discovery, it feels like any other sci-fi show that's on right now with just a Star Trek name and a few labels slapped on it. So, again, it's very, very difficult. The only real way I've been able to enjoy this series is by just saying it's part of its own timeline, because it does not fit in prime canon, and to me it can't be, and it won't be. Okay, one thing that I think has been one of the most decisive things about Discovery for fans is the look of the Klingons. I mean, they completely revamped the way that they look, to the point where they don't even look like Klingons for the most part now. I mean, they look like walking bipedal lizards. And they got different colored skin. It's odd. They do not look the way that they're supposed to. And then I know you've got the fans out there that are saying, oh, well, they've been changed numerous times. What's one more time? Well, that's actually bringing me to the point of what this episode is going to be about. I'm going to talk about the Klingon look, starting from the original series, going all the way up to Discovery at this point. And I kind of just want to talk about why I feel that there was finally a point where an established look finally occurred, and I don't understand why we needed to go to these Discovery-type Klingons that everybody's up in arms about. Okay, so according to makeup artist Glenn Hetrick, he spoke at Star Trek Las Vegas. He reported that the look of the Klingons is going to be changing again in Star Trek Discovery Season 2. Again? I mean, why would they be changing them again all of a sudden? Well, here's his quote. Glenn Hetrick said, quote, "As we move into Season 2, it has been a while since we have been with our characters. It's been a while since we have seen our Klingon friends, so everything keeps evolving. The story has evolved, and I can guarantee you this. You are going to be blown away that they have a completely new look yet again going into Season 2. Okay, you might be sitting there saying to yourself, why are they changing them again? They just did this radical change for when they came onto Discovery. Well, apparently he kind of described it in there are different houses. So some of the people in the different houses, their genetics might be different, so they end up having some different features. They also have different traditions. And he listed, for example, in House Mokai, apparently the Klingons in that house do ritual scarring. In House Dagor, there are Klingons that wear head jewelry. And then there was also House Antak, or Antok, I can't remember how it was pronounced. But apparently Antok was the geneticist, the Klingon geneticist in the two-part Star Trek Enterprise episodes, where they were experimenting with the augment DNA, and they ended up creating the smooth-headed Klingons with that genetic virus. Well, apparently in the Discovery universe, there's a cranial ridge that runs all the way down to the chin. So fans are starting to wonder now, what kind of changes are they talking about? Well, the big one that everybody's focusing on is the hair. Somebody actually did a photoshopped picture of Cole with hair, and to be honest with you, it kind of looks like he would look like a traditional, more like a traditional Klingon. Not exactly the same, but somewhat similar. And maybe other people are thinking maybe teeth changes, maybe facial hair added, who knows? So we'll see what ends up happening. Here's an examination of what a Discovery Klingon looks like, and I'll show it to you right here. Okay, as you can see in this picture, the Klingons that have been introduced in Discovery have bald heads and bald faces. I haven't seen any with any facial hair. If any of you have, please let me know and correct me. This elongated head that's going on. I've never seen a Klingon with a head that was more oval-shaped rather than round. Oddly shaped ears. They kind of seem almost melded into their skin, or into their heads. Facial and neck ridges. They still have the ridges, the cranial ridges, which is fine. But they also have these kind of weird, like bone-like structures on their faces. And then down here, underneath their neck area, they've got some sort of ridging or webbing as well. That has never been seen on a Klingon before. Odd skin colors. There are several different skin colors. I believe Takuvma was dark brown. Cole, I think, looked purple. There were some who were tan. Then, of course, you had Vok, who was an albino, so he was white. Now, granted, there was the albino in the Deep Space Nine episode Blood Oath. I'm not sure if that was a Klingon or not. It probably was. So, I mean, that possibly could happen. The other one, which I'm not sure if this has been noted before or not, but it looks like it to me. The Klingons now look like they have 4 nostrils. They got the regular nostrils and then 2 other nostrils right here. They also have what seem to be like really thick teeth in their mouths, to the point where the actors can barely even say their words without mumbling. This just does not look like a Klingon to me, and it doesn't look like it to a lot of other fans. Some fans don't care, okay, but I don't think that the producers needed to go this far in terms of changing the makeup, changing the look. I'm going to show you how I truly believe that the Klingons finally had an established look that didn't need to be tinkered with. So let's go back all the way back to 1966, or I'm sorry, 1967 actually is when Errand of Mercy premiered. As you can see in these pictures here, the Klingons all had short hair. They all looked like they had makeup put on their face. Really, the Klingon makeup back in the 60s was like a brownish green kind of paint that they put on their faces, and like some Fu Manchu kind of beards and mustaches to kind of make them look a little less human. But really, if you look at these actors who played the Klingons in the original series, let's face it, their fleeces were white as snow. I mean, there was no ethnic diversity in those Klingons whatsoever. And you can see that in Errand of Mercy, you can see that in The Trouble with Tribbles, you can see that in Day of the Dove. There were a couple other episodes that Klingons were in, like Land of Troyes, Private Little War, Friday's Child. But you didn't see any real diversity. So that was the look of the Klingons that was established. Okay, then we go on to Star Trek the Motion Picture in 1979. For the very first time, we saw Klingons with longer hair. Their skin seemed a little bit darker in tone, and they had ridges for the very first time. But if you look, a lot of the Klingons basically had the exact same ridge. It was a real thick one that started like right around here and kind of went back. If you look at some of the basic artwork for Star Trek the Motion Picture, when they were redesigning the Klingons, they did have the ridges that kind of went way back. So we also got to see a little bit of gnarly teeth for the first time as well. So that started to develop the more modern type of Klingon look. I wasn't born until 1980, so I can only imagine what fans of the era at the time felt about that. I'm sure some didn't care, and I'm sure that there were some that were like, what the heck are you doing to our Klingons? These aren't Klingons. Okay? But eventually, as time went on, it seemed to be getting more accepted. By the time the search for Spock and the voyage home came around, you can see Krug and the Klingon ambassador and some of Krug's crew. They have more detailed foreheads that aren't just the ridge going back. There's more like spread out detail in them. In Star Trek V, they kind of seem to go back to kind of like the one ridge kind of Klingon look for Kla and Vixis and the other crew members, and for General Cord. Star Trek VI kind of had a little mix of that too, where it was just the one ridge, but that some of them had the spread out kind of foreheads. Going into the Next Generation, Deep Space Nine and Voyager, obviously they seem to transition well, I think, from the movies. They kind of look more like the Star Trek III, Star Trek IV Klingons that we saw, which would make sense because the Next Generation premiered a year after Star Trek IV came out. So they look pretty much the same. But as I noticed as TNG went on, the foreheads became more detailed. And not only just the foreheads, but they put like grooves in the noses, things of that nature to kind of add more detail to the way that they look. So there were just little tweaks, little minor updates at this point. Now, Worf obviously is the best character to watch in terms of progression, as you can see here. As you can see in Worf's first season picture, he had a spread out forehead, kind of like what was in Star Trek III, but it wasn't very detailed. Once you move into the second season Worf, you can see that they're starting to build the ridges up a little bit more prominently. You're starting to see some more detailed design to it. And that continued as the seasons continued on. Also, you notice that Worf's hair started getting a little bit longer too, to the point where finally in season 6 and season 7 he had his hair long enough that it was able to go into a ponytail. Started seeing Klingons a lot more with a lot longer hair rather than the shorter hair that you saw maybe in Star Trek the Motion Picture. As Next Generation faded and Deep Space Nine and Voyager came out, the look of the Klingons basically stayed the same as they did in the later years of the Next Generation. As you can see here with Worf, his look pretty much stayed the same. Maybe some little more detail in his hair, maybe a little bit more detail in the facial makeup, but pretty much the same. And then you can see the same thing here with General Martok. Look at the way his makeup looks. It doesn't look much different than Michael Dorn's. Another thing that started showing up in the Next Generation Deep Space Nine Voyager era of TV was that the Klingons in their own families had the same looking ridges. Worf and Kurn had the exact same kind of ridge looking. And if you can see right here, Lursa and B'Etor also had the same cranial ridges, and they were also the same as Doros and Torol that were in the episodes. So that family kind of genetic piece kind of passed on. Voyager kind of continued the same thing. Here's an episode, Prophecy, the captain of the Klingon vessel that was found in the Delta Quadrant. Again, him and his crew look very similar to the Next Generation Klingons. Even B'Elanna Torres, if you look at her makeup, she has less cranial ridges, obviously, because she's half Klingon. She doesn't have the teeth or the ridges on the nose or anything like that, but she still has the same hairline, and the head is shaped normally. Okay? Going on into Enterprise, by this point, I would honestly argue that the look of the Klingons was finally established. Okay, if you look at Broken Bow with Klang, okay, you can see even though it's a 22nd century Klingon, you can still tell he looks like the Next Generation group of Klingons, and so did all the Klingons that were on Enterprise at that point. So that says to me that they had decided that was the final way the Klingons were going to look. Okay, then they did the two-part episode with the augment virus that explained the smooth-headed Klingons in the 23rd century, which a lot of fans thought was a bunch of fanboy nonsense. For me personally, I loved it. As a big Star Trek fan, I love little nuggets of fanboy stuff thrown into my Star Trek. Star Wars fans like it when they see it thrown into their movies from past movies and experiences, so why not? I thought it was a lot of fun. So that's pretty much where I say my argument comes from, is that finally Enterprise seemed to really establish it, after all the other shows kind of continued a similar look. Kind of going back, also going back to, we were talking about the Discovery Klingons being bald. We have seen a bald Klingon in Star Trek years before Discovery even came out, and that was General Chang. Now, if you look at General Chang, he does have the cranial ridge, and it kind of goes back a little bit, and he has a little bit of a ponytail back here, okay? But you don't see any of the elongated heads. You don't have these crazy ridges going way back that look like some sort of big, humongous spine. You don't have weird-looking facial features and weird-looking cranial ridges. I mean, the ears are normal, almost human-looking, basically. You don't see them, like, fused to the sides of their heads like you see in Discovery. You know, I just... Basically, my whole point of doing this episode was to just kind of talk about how the changes in this show didn't really, for Klingons, didn't seem necessary. I don't understand why Brian Fuller felt the need. Now, it said on somewhere on the internet that they were upgraded for the HD generation. I think that they still could have been upgraded or tweaked, basically. They didn't need to be changed to the degree that they were. And maybe Star Trek Discovery's producers are seeing that and noticing that. Maybe that's why they're coming in making some sort of change to them in Season 2. Who knows? It could be another big radical departure from what we've seen before. Who knows? Or it could be that they are trying to kind of mesh everything together. The big theme of Discovery this season seems to be to bring canon all together and show how Discovery fits into everything. We'll see how that happens. But really, all they had to have done was tweak the makeup. Seriously. They did that on Discovery with the Andorians. I think they put a couple little like mini antennae above their eyes. And the Tellarites had tusks on some of them. But beyond that, the makeup still looked pretty much the same. But this Klingon look, I don't like. And I don't like that it divided the fan base the way it has. I mean, it's bad enough that the show Discovery caused this big rift for the people that either really like it or really hate it. There doesn't seem to be much in between. There are a few of us. I'm one of the ones in the middle. I don't know what to think of the show, even though it's been almost a year since it come out. So that's basically it for this episode. So now I would like to present an open channel question for next time. What are your thoughts on the Klingons changing it again? Is it something that's necessary to kind of tie it all back together, or is it just something that's going to make fans angry again and just make things worse for the situation that it is now? Please click the like button if you like this video. Also, please comment below. Tell me what your thoughts are. What are your thoughts about the Klingon change coming again in Season 2? Obviously, you can find my YouTube channel here. Just type in Pittsburgh's Trek Chat in the search engine on YouTube. You'll go directly to my page and my series of videos. You can follow the show on Facebook. Just go to facebook.com, type in Pittsburgh's Trek Chat. It'll take you right to the page. You can also follow the show on Twitter at PGH Trek Chat. I look forward to seeing all of you in the next episode, and until then, may yins live long and prosper.